Well, good afternoon and welcome to our fourth community check-in. And we are delighted that you are tuning in and joining us. I'm Pastor Ann Fuqua. I'm a co-pastor here along with David Fuqua, who along with David Biedenbaugh, our Director of Contemporary Worship, is in the sound booth. Oops. Yeah, we have to adjust volume on phones because we're actually wanting to make sure that we know that you're here, that we can greet you, certainly we encourage you to greet one another, whether you are on Facebook or YouTube. We hope that this will be a time of interaction and checking in with one another. So thanks to David and David for joining us. I'm also joined at the table by Stephen Tweedle with Hires Baxley Funeral Services.
Good morning.
And Jessica McCune of Hospice of Marion County.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We are we were just commenting before we went live that with a Monday holiday. And on top of the pandemic, we're all kind of wondering what day it is and wandering around. But regardless of how we've gotten to this time, we are here. And this is an important time to check in with one another and to show some neighborly concern and support. Let me just, and again, I encourage you to comment, question, give your thoughts. But let me just kind of give you an overview of where we've been this month of May. We started meeting at the beginning of this month, and we've covered a lot of ground. And these live streams are recorded, and they are on various Facebook pages, YouTube, so if you've missed anything, you can go back and check in. So we've talked about facing loss and grief. That's how we started, and we talked about how important it is to reach out for assistance and support, and that we're not alone in our grief. We're all sort of in that boat experiencing one form of grief or another because we've all had losses in the midst of this pandemic. We've also talked about various coping strategies, and we gave you a tip on where to find a listing of 100 effective coping strategies on the Hospice of Marion County webpage, and it's been posted elsewhere. So we hope that you are now in the first couple weeks of establishing new and healthy habits and taking good care of yourselves and your loved ones. And last week, we covered a range of topics. We kind of wandered all over the place. We talked about the stress that we're experiencing that is specific to reopening and kind of finding our way into a new normal, and that brings on additional types of stress. We talked about that in this pandemic, we have opportunities to address things that we might have had a tendency to push under the carpet, like some conflict or needs for forgiveness, needs to release and let go. And we also talked about how we could be good neighbors. So that is the ground that we've covered, and today we're going to start with a term that I was introduced to by my colleagues that has been circulating, I think, since at least last week. And even just the term itself, immediately I could identify with it. But I'm eager to hear more about what my colleagues have to say about COVID fatigue. COVID fatigue. Perhaps you have heard that term used. Perhaps it's new to you. Whether it is something you're getting to be familiar with or you've just heard it for the first time, I think we all can begin to kind of resonate with what that means. So why don't we have the conversation about what is COVID fatigue?
I don't know, but I have it.
I don't know, but I have it, exactly.
Yeah, I'm ready to start moving forward. And we're all sort of giddy about this too. We were laughing right before we started that I am done. And my wife is still trying to put on hazmat suits before she goes outside. For me, it's ready to start moving forward. I'm tired of the new terminology, the new normal. I'm tired of all of that stuff. I acknowledge that things have changed, but I want to try to go back to the way things used to be, with some modifications, obviously.
Or something different than right now.
Exactly right.
I think also it is the stress level. Normally in life, there's a hum, and then all of a sudden, with 2 or 3 months of sheltering at home, the stress level just increases, and our reaction time decreases and our impatience increases. And so it's just a whole new level of the onion of which we're expected to accommodate and adjust, and at the same time try to practice kindness and wisdom and prudence. And then there's so many complications. Another term we talked about last week was the crisis within a crisis. Domestic violence, battery cases. What about when home isn't safe? I know the teachers, everyone involved with the education system wants school to start because for many children it is safer than being at home. And of course that is heartbreaking. So lots to think about, lots to accommodate, and how do we do that?
So I'm familiar, as someone in a helping profession. Certainly, I'm familiar with the term compassion fatigue. Is there anything in terms of addressing compassion fatigue when we're just sort of we're kind of worn out? We've given all that we can give. The cup is empty. We sort of need to attend to ourselves. Is there any wisdom from addressing compassion fatigue that we can kind of transfer to COVID fatigue?
I think so. I think another layman's term for compassion fatigue might be burnout. And I think, again, with what we do, we all have to be very careful of that. And I think you can translate that into COVID burnout. And then it does affect people in different ways. So, I've got 3 teenagers I've mentioned at home, sitting at home with their nose in a computer trying to figure out their homework. And then you've mentioned that some of your neighbors have littler children that are trying to figure out, this parent has them now, this grandparent has them now, because the parents have to work. So that burnout, that COVID fatigue, the compassion fatigue, it can hit different people at different levels and where they're at in their life.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. The techniques we talked about the second week for just managing stress often translate to self-care, which is a wonderful remedy or trying to chip away at the iceberg for compassion fatigue, and I think for COVID fatigue as well, taking the time, and it would be Sabbath, the rest of Sabbath, that same principle of you are valuable, you are worthy of being ministered to, and we take care of our cars, and we change oil, and we put gas in them, and we check the tires. So of course there are many similar things, that principles and disciplines we would have to create habits to take care of ourselves.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering if you, as I think about this and I think about burnout, that's such a great analogy for me. It would probably be great to take a break. And this, I guess as I'm sitting here, I'm realizing how difficult that is, because even whether we, the decision of do we go outside or not, or what's open, what's not, do I wear a mask, or is it okay not to in this situation? It seems like what we need when we have COVID fatigue or COVID burnout is to take a break. But that's kind of hard, isn't it, when this reality is so encompassing? So what might taking a break look like? If you could just say, for, an hour or two or an afternoon or something, I'm not going to do anything COVID related. What might that look like in your household?
Well,
or work?
And I think for all of us, it's keeping a list real handy of things that give you joy. So, and personally for me, I love being outside. I love flowers. I'm not a great gardener, but I certainly try to begin that journey.
Appreciate other people's work.
I try to water everything and keep it alive. But there's still so much, just being outside, seeing the sun, the blue sky, or even the rain, which is so welcome, and seeing something living. I remember when I worked at the hospital and in pastoral care, part of our job was supporting our staff, a big part of our job. And if I knew if they'd had a horrible day, a horrible situation on the floor, if I could just get them to walk outside. I mean, there was usually something green, something alive, the wind might blow it, and just to remember that there is still an ordered world, even in the most unordered of times.
Definitely.
What we did is after dinner one time, a couple of weeks ago, we just said, let's go get some ice cream. We went to one of the local drive-through places, and again, we've got the kids, and they were cooped up, and you would have thought that we gave them the world. Just going out and getting ice cream and pulling off, sitting in the car and eating it. It was that 30 minutes was enough of a break for everybody to kind of get recharged. And we're doing very similar to what you mentioned. We're working a lot outside. We've got some projects that we've started and are trying to figure out. But it's good though, because it's stretched me on some of the things personally that I've had to learn. I knew nothing about building or construction, and I was driving nails into concrete this morning. So
Wow,
so
that's
it's
amazing.
good to stretch out and learn. It gets you distracted from the fatigue. And I think too that things are hypersensitive right now, and we get attuned to that. And we don't know where it's coming from. So if a hurricane's coming, we know it's coming, it's going to be here in 3 days, it's going to be here for 3 days, and everybody's going to be affected. With this, we don't know who's affected, where it's coming from, or, like you mentioned, do we wear a mask here? Do we not wear one here? Do we have to not go to this area? So it gets you hypersensitive, and that's not good.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, that hypervigilance, and that creates its own sort of stress and fatigue.
One other complication just right below that is not all communities are created equal. And the guidelines come down from state officials, governors, chief justices for the court system, the Centers for Disease Control, CDC. So they make decisions for safety, and of course they're considering the worst case scenario, urban areas. And in Marion County, we have had a very different experience, and I understand it's hard to govern and keep an entire state of people safe. But at the same time, after 2 or 3 months, when the guidelines that are used for a Miami and an Orlando, it really are different from Ocala and Marion County. So that, I think, creates stress and frustration, and at the very least, COVID fatigue.
Well, yeah, that approach of, approaching this as if it were one size fits all, and it's not. And so that really does make sense that that kind of dissonance, like our experience is this, but we're getting this, and they don't line up, and that can add its own fatigue. One practice that I know our Bishop, Ken Carter, offers, and I've had a couple of spiritual mentors who have also offered a similar practice, is what is called a technology Sabbath. And for some of us, that may be hard because our work is so attached, or parenting, we really do feel the need to have those phones close by. But I think there is some value, even if, like you said, it's 30 minutes or an hour or a couple of hours, to be able to put your phone away, not even have it in the same room, which might, some people might start hyperventilating in a way, but just try it, even for just 30 minutes at a time, to be able to say for 30 minutes or an hour, I'm going to just be. I'm not going to check Facebook. I'm not going to check the news. I'm not going to, look up another term from this COVID crisis to, what is COVID fatigue, just to let it rest for a little while. I think I might try that just because I have a tendency to get overwhelmed sometimes by the information, and that can create fatigue for me. And the funny thing is that when I'm in that overwhelm, it gets really hard, kind of ironically, to be able to put the phone down. And that's probably what I need to do.
Yeah, I call this my electronic leash. Because it's always there and you can't get away from it. So one thing I did do, again, over the weekend is I put it away. Now, when I went back to it, there were 70-something emails that I had to catch up on. So you have to be really careful.
Wow,
and what I decided to do is, okay, I'm going to look at these 5 emails, concentrate on these 5 emails, and then put it back away. And then that's what I did throughout the night, is go back to those emails, because there's no way I can rip through 70 emails and try to catch myself up through it, because I'm defeating the purpose. So it's good to put it down. And if you have as much coming at you, just stop and take a breath and decide, I'm going to do this much right now.
That's good, and that's all about kind of setting boundaries and, just knowing from being a parent that how important boundaries are, that young children particularly, and even our teenager, even though he wouldn't admit it, having boundaries is a good thing. It creates a sense of safety and security. It allows us to put into practice that wisdom of taking one step at a time, and to focus on what we can focus on and not get into the the mental anxiety of, oh, I've got 65 more emails, rather than celebrating that I have just finished 5 emails and I've done good work and I've also taken a break. So those are seems to be good strategies, along with practicing boundaries. Let me check in to just make sure, is there anything from our group? Okay, I'm trying to watch it at the same time, but I'm not necessarily always good at that. So, as we, continue to deal with COVID fatigue, COVID burnout, we do like to, whenever we've gotten together, I've noticed that we've sort of tackled an issue or a problem or something that's a challenge, but then we've also flipped to the side of opportunity. And that's been, I think, a good rhythm for us. One of the things that I was thinking about is, in terms of opportunity, is how have your priorities shifted? And have you seen some changes in what you value or the choices that you make? Have you learned anything about what's most important in life during this whole pandemic?
Well, I've learned life is still as complex as ever.
Despite shutdowns.
It was interesting, the first 2 weeks, I noticed that, and I volunteer a lot, and everything I volunteer with, I totally believe in and enjoy it, and I mean, it's a priority in addition to work. But when everything stopped, I was amazed that I loved being home, and I didn't miss any of those meetings or obligations. And so that created a challenge for me to figure out when it's something I care about and believe in, but also really, really, really enjoyed the slower pace. My husband has a very big family, and one of the siblings has a big family, and they started checking in once a week on a Thursday night, just the family, and invited us. So, and they just enjoyed, during a crisis, having each other. So I think communication, I mean, we've all know that it's all about relationships. That's the joy in life. That's the reward. That's what benefits our health. So I think we've had more time, and I know I'm speaking for all of us, that everyone's enjoyed the slower pace. And to me, it is very, very hard to dial down all the things that ask for our time and are ever so important.
Do you feel that once things are more, well, whatever that new normal is, and do you feel that you will come at those volunteer activities that you did and other things that you did, will you reevaluate? Will you make different choices, or?
I'm going to let you know how that goes.
Ooh, excellent. Stay tuned for that.
That's the question I'm asking myself now, and I've had plenty of time to do that.
Yeah,
so,
good time for reflection, for sure.
Yeah, I do volunteer work too, and one of the things that I've found is I have to dedicate that time. I do it every Tuesday for 3 hours, and I dedicate that time. And there's times where I'm like, oh, I got to go do this. What I actually I'm missing it. I kind of want to get back into that, because I miss the people that I'm there helping. Not only the organization itself as a whole, but the people that I'm also,
the relationships.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's what somebody had posted on the Facebook is the value of family, and I agree with that 100%. And we've had to make adjustments in how we saw our extended family, and fortunately, it worked for us. And the other thing too, and I know I don't want to concentrate too much on this, but our work lives too, and what we do work-wise, with the changing of how these things have come. So, there's also been adjustments made for what you guys do as far as what we do, and so it's multifaceted, the changes.
Yeah, very much so.
The first 2 weeks it was slower, but then very quickly the pace picked up with all the Zoom meetings and all and then, I mean, I'm not in advertising, but anyone that is in marketing or advertising, everyone had to change their campaigns, all of this time and design and money, and it just was heartbreaking to me how a crisis as if that wasn't enough to adjust to, could also bring in a whole new level of activity and busyness and money, unbudgeted money, not to mention countered against the lost revenue.
Right. That is so, yeah, that's so interesting because I experienced the same thing, that the first 2 weeks there was this kind of lull, but then, as time picked up with the Zoom meetings, also for us, it kind of reopened, like you said, with work, reopening a church and in-person church, while at the same time learning new skills for online church and ministry, doing those both simultaneously, and now even as we concentrate more efforts toward reopening for in-person worship and ministry, all that does, it does have enormous amounts of energy, knowledge, experimentation. It's very much a day by day, week by week reality.
And the teachers, oh my gosh, the teachers have just had to, everyone I've talked to have said they're working harder than they ever have in their whole life.
We experienced that 2-week lull too. But what that does is that gives me hope that we as Americans, and I know it's bigger than that, but that's only my experience, is how quickly we could adjust to a whole new thing. It took 2 weeks for us to figure this out, and we're moving in a whole different direction.
Wow, yeah, that's a good point.
So that's hope for me.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very positive way, that adaptability. Yay! And I think just as before we close, that for me, I can totally agree with everything that you say. One of the things too is for me, self-care has been a huge thing. I realized that last year was kind of abysmal for me for self-care, and this has been a chance to restart some of those healthy habits, as we talked about 2 weeks ago. And then I think, just to be for us again, being committed to being the church differently, and that the church includes. It includes certainly our campus and everything that happens here, and we keep saying how eager and happy we will be when we can be together. But I think I've really prioritized for me the importance of just new and emerging ways of being the church, and kind of looking forward to that as an adventure, rather than as something that is a scary reality that, oh my goodness, how can the church adapt? Well, the church is adapting and always has, and we are following that spirit. And it's a daunting time, but it's an exciting time. And I'm actually now looking forward to what we might experience. Not minimizing the hard stuff, but I'm looking forward to what we might learn.
The band is back, right? You got
yeah,
that?
This week we had a fuller band, that's right, and certainly...
Female accompanist.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're working our way, as we all are, toward what reopening and reemerging looks like.
And you talked about the church wanting to be a source of hope, and it's reminded me that it is a promise that we don't have to be alone in this. And one of my hopes and prayers throughout this time has been that all over the world, if anyone passed a physical building, a place of worship, that they would recognize it, even if it was for the first time in their lives, that it was a place of power and hope and renewal and kind people that were willing to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope that that's the spirit that will go into the next month, because it's right upon us. June is here. And we are going to transition our community check-ins to once a month rather than every week. We're hoping that continues to meet the need for some neighborly outreach and support. And
if you need more,
let us know, because we are adaptable. That's what we are adaptable. So we hope that you will join us the next time we gather for this community check-in, which will be on Wednesday, June 10th. and we're going to move it just a little bit earlier to 11:30 a.m. And we do hope that you will join us again at that time. We'll send out some reminders on Facebook and other ways that we can reach out on social media. And we do hope that this month of May, these conversations have been helpful for you, that if it started a conversation with yourself and your loved ones, coworkers, neighbors, we're grateful. And we are grateful. And we are grateful for this community, for everybody who calls this home. And we hope, again, that you continue to stay safe and to stay well and to be good neighbors to one another. Do you have any parting words for our folks until we meet again?
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, we do appreciate you, and take care.